Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're all about, cutting through the noise on complex topics, finding those aha moments you can actually use. Today, we're taking a journey just for you into something pretty fascinating and, let's be honest, often perplexing, the complexities of truth and deception. But before we really dive in, just a quick word for our amazing community. For all of you who've already subscribed, seriously, thank you. You're a huge part of this exploration. And if you haven't joined our, growing constellation of curious minds yet, we'd love it if you'd like this deep dive, maybe share it with someone else who likes to think deep, and subscribe to the All Sorts podcast right here on YouTube. We're always sharing new ideas over on X, Instagram, and Threads too. And of course, there are plenty of other deep dives waiting for you. Your support, truly, it fuels everything we do, day by day, deep dive by deep dive.
So today, we're plunging into truth and deception. We've gathered insights from, all over online chats, psychology studies, even philosophy to really try and grasp what honesty means.
Exactly. Our goal here is to unpack all these different viewpoints, pull out the surprising bits of knowledge, and hopefully help you navigate this tricky landscape of truth-telling in your own life.
Ooh.
Okay, let's get into it. So, first off, there's this powerful idea that seems to grab a lot of people. Radical honesty. We saw quite a bit about this, inspired by thinkers like Sam Harris. People online, anonymous users mostly, were saying things like engaging with his ideas made them feel this strong urge to just stop lying completely.
A total commitment.
Yeah, like a real personal transformation they were aiming for. And the benefits they described, they're pretty compelling. Consistently, people talk about life just getting easier, like a real sense of freedom from that background hum of anxiety or guilt.
Because you're not juggling lies, right?
Exactly. Less to keep track of. Imagine the mental energy that saves. And they also mentioned gaining more respect from others, which is interesting.
How so?
Well, like being the person someone could go to for genuinely honest feedback, even if it was tough. Or, a spouse asking if you really didn't like dinner.
Yes. The small, everyday truths.
Right. And one person shared this really simple but profound mantra from their therapist. Tell the truth and be kind. That seemed to really capture it for many.
That's a great distillation. And what's fascinating is that this isn't just people feeling better. There's actually some science behind it.
Oh, really? Like biological?
Yeah. Psychological studies show our brains react quite differently. When we lie, parts of the brain, specifically the limbic system that's tied to our fight or flight stress response, they light up. They become frantic.
Wow.
But an honest brain, it stays much more relaxed. It suggests maybe an innate biological preference for truth. It's like the path of least resistance for our wiring.
Okay, so biology might even be pushing us towards honesty because it's less stressful. But that brings up the big question, doesn't it?
Which is?
Does that mean telling every single truth? Because that feels, difficult. Our sources definitely suggested that not lying isn't quite the same as telling absolutely everything.
Right. That's a crucial distinction.
Yeah. And one thing that came up a lot was the idea that you can just decline to answer.
Yeah.
That choosing not to respond to a question is actually a truthful alternative to making something up.
It maintains your privacy, sets boundaries.
Exactly, without being deceptive. Sam Harris apparently puts it simply, suggesting the truth might just be, I'd rather not say. It's about owning your right not to share something.
And that leads us straight into this really tricky area, the so-called lie of omission. This sparks a lot of debate.
Right. Is not saying something the same as lying.
Well, that's the core of it. Some argue pretty strongly that if you deliberately omit information with the intent to mislead someone, then yes, that's a form of deception. It functions like a lie.
Okay.
But others push back. They say, look, you're justified in keeping your own thoughts or certain facts private. They stress the difference between actively saying something untrue versus just not disclosing everything you know or think.
So it's about active falsehood versus passive non-disclosure.
Kind of. And it forces us to ask, how do we balance being honest with other important things like, being compassionate or tactful or just keeping personal stuff personal?
That balance feels key.
Absolutely. And this is where perspectives like Stoicism are quite helpful. They classify honesty as an external indifferent.
Meaning?
Meaning its moral value isn't fixed. It depends entirely on the context, the how and the why. Is it being used wisely, justly, courageously, moderately?
So honesty needs other virtues to guide it.
Precisely. The Stoics would argue that not everything true needs to be said, or even should be said. Wisdom and moderation are vital. It comes back to that framework many sources mention. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary?
True, kind, necessary. That's a useful filter.
It helps ensure honesty isn't just used bluntly, that it's applied thoughtfully.
Okay, that makes sense in theory. But
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about reality. What happens when the world itself seems to push back against this commitment to truth?
Yeah, the pressures.
Exactly. It's one thing to value honesty, another thing entirely when you feel like you can't be honest without negative consequences.
Like in the workplace.
That was a huge theme.
Mm-hmm.
People talked about honesty being seen as, well, impractical, sometimes even damaging to your career.
Covering your back.
Right. We saw examples like, instead of admitting, I forgot to process that payment, it gets spun as an admin error, deflecting personal responsibility.
Avoid fallout.
Yeah. And there was this quite cynical, but maybe realistic sentiment expressed by some that lies are necessary for the workplace in our current economic model, or that lying lubricates many business deals.
That's a bleak view, but probably relatable for some.
It really highlights this tension, doesn't it, between wanting to be honest and feeling like the system demands something else.
It does. And it's not just about work.
No, definitely not. Sam Harris himself, the advocate for honesty, acknowledges extreme situations where lying is basically self-defense.
Life or death scenarios or severe oppression.
Exactly. Think about living in an oppressive society where admitting your true beliefs, maybe religious doubts or your sexuality, could literally get you imprisoned or killed.
In those cases, lying is clearly the lesser evil.
Right. As Harris put it, in those hostile environments, lying becomes the least of your problems. It's about survival.
And connecting this back, these examples really show how societal structures, power dynamics, they can actively push people towards dishonesty.
It's not always just a personal choice then.
Not entirely. Sometimes it feels like something you have to do because of external forces.
Yeah.
And remember the biology we talked about, the stress.
Yeah, the brain freaking out.
Well, studies confirm that physical toll, the racing heart, the sweating. But here's something even more unsettling they found.
What's that?
The brain seems to adapt to dishonesty over time.
Adapts. How?
Research suggests that with repetition, the negative emotional response, that stress signal from the limbic system, it actually decreases. It gets easier to lie.
Oh, wow. So the more you do it, the less bad it feels internally.
Potentially, yes. Which could lead to an escalation. Bigger lies become more possible because the internal alarm bell gets quieter.
That is, yeah, that's a really chilling thought. The idea that our brains can just get used to it.
It is.
So, okay, we've talked about the ideal, the nuances, the external pressures.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the biggest challenge isn't even lying to others. Maybe it's about figuring out the truth within ourselves.
Self-deception or just
But-
fusion?
Both? Maybe. This journey really leads to this almost poetic point.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the truth itself is just incredibly hard to pin down, especially our own truth.
Mm-hmm.
We saw sources discussing that struggle, trying to sort out what you genuinely feel versus what you think you should feel or what you want to feel.
That internal landscape can be murky.
Definitely.
Yeah.
One writer put it really well. It's easier to know when I'm lying than when I'm telling the truth because your own emotions can be contradictory or painful or just unclear.
Yeah.
And this led to a really interesting idea. Could lies sometimes help us, like echolocate a truth we haven't found yet?
Echolocate, like
Yeah.
bats.
Sort of. Like the lie acts as a placeholder or a probe, helping you figure out the shape of a deeper reality you haven't quite grasped.
That's a fascinating concept, almost like fiction.
Exactly. And that came up too, how fiction, even though it bends factual details, can sometimes convey a more profound, universal truth. Like Tim O'Brien's book, The Things They Carried. It's about the story truth versus the happening truth.
Suggesting that deep understanding might go beyond just literal facts.
Right. It's complex.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And from a philosophical standpoint, honesty is often called a neglected virtue. But it's so fundamental for self-improvement.
More than just not telling fibs.
Oh, much more. Its scope includes fighting against cheating, stealing, hypocrisy, and crucially, as you just mentioned, self-deception.
Okay.
At its heart, honest behavior is defined as not intentionally distorting the facts as the honest person sees them. That last part is important. It acknowledges perception.
And motivation matters too, right?
Critically. True virtue isn't about self-interest. Philosophers like Kant use the example of a shopkeeper who's honest with prices.
Yeah.
If he does it just because he's scared of losing customers if he cheats, that's not true virtuous honesty. That's just calculated self-interest. Real honesty comes from a place of duty or love or justice.
Got it. So, given all this complexity, And the fact that, well, research shows people do lie pretty regularly. How can we actually cultivate honesty? How do we get better at it?
That's the practical question, and there are strategies. One is seeking out what they call moral exemplars.
People who embody honesty.
Exactly. Individuals who spoke truth to power, who addressed difficult issues courageously, even when it was scary. Think of historical figures like Frederick Douglass fighting slavery, or Mother Jones advocating for workers, learning from their examples.
Okay, find role models. What else?
Using moral reminders. Things like keeping a journal, engaging with readings about ethics, or even things like honor codes.
Do honor codes actually work?
Research suggests they do. Studies, like Lisa Shu's work, have shown that having students sign an honor code before a task can significantly reduce cheating. It primes the idea of honesty.
Interesting. So reminders help keep it front of mind.
Yes. And finally, cultivating other virtues can indirectly boost honesty. Things like friendship and love.
How does that work?
Well, if you genuinely care about others, value those relationships built on trust, your motivation to lie for purely selfish gain tends to decrease naturally. Connection fosters integrity.
That makes a lot of sense. So despite all the challenges, all the nuances we've talked about, the core message still seems to be that choosing honesty, aiming for it, is worthwhile.
Definitely.
Like those Reddit users said, it ultimately makes life so much easier. Maybe not simpler in the moment always, but easier overall.
Less mental burden, more authentic connections.
Yeah, leading to being seen as, and maybe feeling like a very authentic person. It seems like a path that, despite the bumps, leads to greater peace of mind and stronger relationships in the long run.
I think that's a fair takeaway.
So we've really journeyed through quite a bit today, from that compelling ideal of radical honesty, through the tricky nuances of what truth even means, facing those real-world pressures, and even pondering how hard it is to grasp our own truth. Hopefully, understanding all these layers gives you a clearer lens to navigate your own world.
And perhaps a final thought to leave you with. Maybe the real measure of an honest life isn't about achieving some perfect, unbroken record of telling the truth. Maybe it's more about the ongoing, courageous commitment to seeking and facing reality, both external and internal, even when it's deeply uncomfortable. And constantly asking yourself, not just, am I telling the truth right now, but am I truly living the truth that I'm discovering?
That's a powerful question to carry forward. As you continue your own deep dives into the world, remember that exploring these kinds of nuances really does enrich your understanding and shape how you see things. We really hope you'll continue this journey of discovery with us on the All Sorts podcast. If this deep dive resonated with you, please do consider liking it, sharing it with someone else who enjoys these explorations, and subscribing to the All Sorts podcast on YouTube. You can also find us sparking conversations on X, Instagram, and Threads, and of course check out our whole library of past deep dives. Your engagement truly fuels our mission, and we're just so grateful for every single one of you who joins us on this quest for knowledge.